This and every edition of Bang the Book Radio is presented by DSI Sportsbook. You sign up over at DSI using the promo code BTB and the number 25. You'll get a $25 free bet just for signing up, 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, and 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. Two guests come your way here today. The first, Mr. Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. Joe, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing well today, but tough college football NFL week, man. Just ended up about 500 at the end of things, so got time to sharpen that pencil and get back at her.
I'll tell you what, man. I'm so pissed off at the NFL today that I almost have no interest in talking about it, because yesterday was a microcosm of what can happen in the NFL. Jacksonville gets that miraculous strip six touchdown, overturned on review. Jaguars wind up not covering. They weren't going to cover the 5 that was out there anyway, but they could have covered the 3.5 for the Super Contest. They don't do that. The Browns, the ultimate shit show in the NFL. I've run out of things to talk about with the Cleveland Browns, even though we are going to talk about DeShone Kizer here today. How they failed to cover that game is beyond my recognition. I have no idea.
Oh, that was a tough one to watch, and just terrible. I mean, especially if you watch that first half, you're really feeling good. If you had a Browns ticket, they looked great first half, whole team.
Yeah, and then whatever the hell happened at the end of the first half, I don't know. We'll talk about that with DeShone Kizer here in a few minutes. But they didn't cover the 6.5 first half line, and I had some people reach out to me on Twitter about that. And then they have first and goal at the 5, looking for a garbage time touchdown. Honestly, with it being garbage time, they're probably a favorite to score from there. And first play, first and goal, Kizer throws the world's worst fade route, and it's picked off. All right, anyway. All right, let's talk about a couple of almost real football teams. I don't know. That's one of the things, Joe, is if you watch the NFL every week, there are some bad teams and some worse coaches out there. And, man, I know we all love the NFL. We love the fantasy aspect. We love the gambling aspect. The product that the NFL is putting out right now is just not very good.
No, there's some bad football. We talked about it last week, some of the bad football. You can blame injuries, but right now there's a bit of a coaching epidemic. I think there's some I've talked about the linebackers and some of the coverage and lacking. It's not just, college coaches aren't getting these players ready. It's just bad coaching and just some flat-out quitting teams. The Giants, it's evident. There's just a whole lot of quit on that field, and they're not the only ones, and it's showing up in the scoreboard. And, yeah, there's just so few games. Even you look on the schedule next week, it's just, not a lot to look forward to.
All right, well, I guess we'll kind of try to look forward to this Monday night game here between Miami and Carolina. I've got a play on this one for the Super Contest, hoping to squeeze out a 2-3, which very easily could have been a 4-1. Although Jacksonville, to be fair, I mean, they didn't look like they were going to cover that game for the majority of it. So, it would have been nice to catch a little bit of the right side of luck there in that one, but, of course, I wasn't able to do that. In any event here, we've got this Monday night game here tonight between Miami and Carolina. And, again here, I mean, you've got a Miami team that, from a record standpoint, looks like it's a team at 4-4, but offensively, up until last week against Oakland, they were absolutely atrocious. Carolina's 6-3. Their offense is kind of a mess throughout the season. Cam Newton had that couple-week stretch where he looked really good, and then outside of that, he's looked pretty poor here throughout the year. So I think the most surprising thing about this game is the spread, with Carolina as a 9-point favorite, because this is a matchup of two very inconsistent football teams.
Yeah, what you're getting from week to week is almost a mystery. I think specifically the Dolphins. I like Adam Gase, and there's some real talent on that roster. It's just Miami wants to hammer it out every week, and they'll try that with Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams, and they want to stay ahead of the sticks that way. But one thing that is consistent in this game and in this whole situation, the Panthers and Luke Kuechly running that defense, that front seven is always tough. They've got the talent with Lodulele, and Kawan Short is just manimal inside of there. But with Kuechly, they're lining things up. It's just so tough to run against them. They're really just a whole different identity in defense. And I think if if the Dolphins want to have a prayer, I mean, they kind of have to really test the perimeters, test James Bradbury, Worley, the other kid, and use the talent you got there. Landry is a good player, and I still think Devontae Parker, that's a guy, the star-level type of athlete. Just continue to develop him, water him like a flower. Like this guy is the plays are there, and I know Cutler likes him. So I think that's the area they can win because they have some speed on the perimeter, and Cutler can get it down the field. I mean, say what you want about it, he's still got one of my favorite releases, the way he spins that ball. He's always been a natural. It's just kind of upstairs with Jay. He's a mobile guy. He throws well on the run. I think the defenses still have to consider him a threat. With he gets it downfield with ease. So it's just when he gambles, he's not just a threat to the defense. He's a threat to his own team at times. So I still think the Dolphins, there is potential for them to score points. It's just I think it's going to have to come through the passing game, and then on the other side, I guess you got to factor in the Panthers here. Ryan Cleel's out for this game, so that hurts their checks at the line of scrimmage. It just means Cam Newton's going to have to multitask a lot more and, break down things ahead of time before the plays. But he's totally capable. It's just interesting offense. Like I think you just said, you don't know what to get week to week from the Panthers offense. Sometimes they run some flat-out option stuff. So I mentioned a few weeks back, they almost look like Navy or Army with some of the crazy pre-snap motion they were doing, and just I think it was limited to Cam and the injury, but also McCaffrey, basically that's the focal point. The tough part about the Panthers is like if a defense is coming in, it's like, well, who leads them in receiving? It's McCaffrey, and they kind of bottle down on him. There's no Greg Olsen to test the depth of the field there, so it's just what they're going to do. They have to get creative. Curtis Samuel, that's another guy, might be an X factor here, but Kiko Alonso, I think that's a guy that sticks out on this Miami Dolphins defense. Just a really good player for them, and then Rashad Jones. They're not stiffs on that side of the ball. They've got some real difference makers. So, if someone's trying to handicap this game, good luck. I think it's a really tough look because the Dolphins – on that side of the ball, on the defense, I know there's not a lot of quit there, and Ndamukong Suh, people criticize him. He's all in, man. That guy's still sort of a force in nature, and another player that you just can't single him. You have to account for it every play. If he's not getting doubled, he's going to make a play in the backfield, and so this is a very difficult game to look at.
Carolina, just 4.8 yards per play this season. They're one of 4 teams with more interceptions, than touchdowns in the passing game. The others are the 49ers, the Broncos, and the Cleveland Browns. So they're in some high esteem there in terms of that company. But the thing that bothers me about Carolina here is that you have some guys you can be really creative with. One of them being, the former NFL MVP, Cam Newton, who, if you want to protect him from a health standpoint, I get it. I mean, obviously you've invested a lot in him as a franchise, and you want to make sure that you're not putting him into any compromising positions with his own personal health after football. But still, I mean, this is a big-bodied guy that you can find some different things to do with him. I just don't think that Mike Shula is the right fit for the personnel that's on this offense. And maybe it's because Greg Olsen's out, but, they move a big target in Kelvin Benjamin while Olsen's out, which is kind of a head-scratcher to begin with. You've got Jonathan Stewart and Christian McCaffrey with 2.9 yards per carry apiece. So both of them down below 3 yards in a cloud of dust. McCaffrey's a good receiver. Curtis Samuel is a guy that you would think, they would find a better use for, but I just don't know if Mike Shula has the creative ability to utilize a guy like Curtis Samuel. So for Carolina here, I just think that there's a lot lacking with this offense that they could be doing that they're not. Now, maybe this changes in the future as you get a second year of Samuel and McCaffrey in this scheme, but it just feels to me like, maybe you need something a little bit more creative, maybe a guy with more of a college background to run this offense based on the personnel that you have. I mean, you don't have a stand in the pocket and throw it type of guy where you can have a retread NFL offensive coordinator calling the plays for that type of system. I think Carolina needs to be a little bit more creative here and maybe reevaluate that position over the offseason.
Yeah, and there's going to be some potential guys out there. If Chicago really does completely do the overhaul with the coaching staff, one of our favorite offensive coordinators, Dal Loggins, could be available, and that'd be a guy love to see what he could do with Cam Newton. And I'd have to agree. I mean, there's really, say what you want about Cam off the field. I think he's a little bit of a prima donna. Well, just look at the way he dresses. There's no weapon like that in the NFL. That's basically your ultimate look there. As you mentioned, the height, the length, he still has speed, and it's not like he's some clod throwing the football. He's very accurate, and I think, there is a definite need for a little bit, I don't want to say more creativity, but I will have to at least say that Shula has been limited. You lose a lot of the playbook without a guy like Greg Olsen in there, and I think that's why they've had to just kind of go to the back glossary and really dig some stuff up with running backs. And also, it is a head-scratcher, I'll agree with you, because why get rid of Kelvin Benjamin when he's basically kind of like a faux tight end? He can't run. He can't separate, so well, you should just try and get him matched up on a linebacker or a safety. That's probably where he can win. But, I just probably more of a getting out of it. They don't want to re-sign it. Just more of a numbers game and bookkeeping process. Find a suitor for him. You don't have to worry about his contract later because you're not going to re-sign him.
All right, then on the Dolphins side here, 4.4 yards per play for this team. That's tied for last in the league with the Baltimore Ravens. We all know how bad their offense is. Miami doesn't have a rushing touchdown yet this season, which obviously seems like that's kind of a problem area for a team. But then, they moved Jay Ajayi. They're going to go with Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams, and Williams was sick throughout the week last week, so we'll see how much or how involved he is here in the offensive game plan for Miami. But where are the Dolphins going with this thing? I mean, you've got this stopgap quarterback in Jay Cutler. You're hoping Ryan Tannehill comes back healthy next year, and I totally understand that. But also, is Ryan Tannehill the guy? I mean, have we seen enough of a sample size from him yet to make that determination? Is he the guy for Adam Gase? I know that we're looking way into the future here, and I think neither one of us really has too much to say about the side or total for this game. I talked about it last week. I think the number is too high. I think Miami is the side here. But going forward for Miami, I mean, what do you see from them? Can Adam Gase figure this thing out? Are these two backs better fits for him than Jay Ajayi? I mean, what is the ceiling for Miami going forward?
Well, it's not high. I mean, they just got limits to where they're going on offense. I blame a little bit of the line because there's a lot invested here. Jawan James was a high pick, Laramie Tunsil a first rounder, and Laramie, as big a fan as I was, I have to admit I was wrong. He's got some bad footage out there. You don't have to dig too hard either to find him getting beat. So that's a guy I think some of their investments really haven't panned out, and I really respect Jay and what he can do, but bringing him in, I think really set them back. But going forward, just where this team is upstairs, the general manager, was it Chris Greer? He's only been there a couple of years. What say he really has? I think that if anything, getting rid of a guy like Jay Ajayi when they did, sure, he's got a bum knee, bad meds, there's a history there, and then what if it is a locker room? I guess that had to be it, but still, that really takes away a lot. I think in the locker room more so than anything, like that to a man, the rest of the defense knows, man, it's really going to be tough getting short yardage and pounding stuff at goal line now without that guy. So, it's tough to find the motivation angle, I think, for Miami more than anything.
Well, and I think the play here on tonight's game, if you don't want to play this one straight, and I don't blame you for that, and again, number 8.5 or 9 at DSI, 8.5 at Bet Online, 5 Dimes, and several other places out there. If you don't want to bet this game straight, you can probably tease up either side and then play around with teasing the total up, because you've got a total here of 38.5 in that range. Bring the total up into the mid-40s. It's hard to see these two offenses, both averaging less than 5 yards per play, lighting up the scoreboard, even though, primetime overs have been a thing in the NFL for the last several years. But, if you want to take Miami and tease them up to 14.5 or 15 in a game with a low total, or tease Carolina down if you like the Panthers a little bit, that's probably the way to go here with tonight's game, right, Joe?
Well, either that or I'd maybe just take a Panthers ticket and hope for the best. But yeah, that's where I'd lean. Like I do like some people can criticize teasers all they want, but this feels like a situation where you could really take advantage of that. But yeah, I'm probably falling back, researching some action for Tuesday and Wednesday night.
All right, there you go. That's a good way to go there. All right, let's talk our week in review section here, and we're going to go ahead and start with the New Orleans Saints. And I was on the Buffalo Bills. It was the most popular consensus pick in the Super Contest here this week, and the Bills just could not stop the New Orleans Saints. And the amazing thing for the Saints here is that it wasn't Drew Brees. And when you look at the Saints, when you consider the way that their schedule shakes out year in and year out, you kind of look for those spots to circle to go against them when they're away from the dome, when Brees has to go and play outside. So they'll just run for 6 touchdowns now this year. Man, this New Orleans team is legit. They're for real, and this defense continues to get better.
Yeah, that's another part of it. I don't remember them having a defense this good. Now, sure, they've been opportunistic, but they've got a real pass rush. And as you mentioned, that running game, I know I probably talked too much about the offensive line, but maker Alvin Kamara is sneaking into the Rookie of the Year conversation. But it's just funny. I think this is probably the first time in Drew Brees' Saints career that he could actually just audible to whatever run he wants. And it's a realistic threat now. And teams are just going to have their hands full. Like, that's a hell of a proposition. Well, we might have to stack 8 in the box here, but that is Drew Brees behind center. Old Hawkeye is going to pick you clean. And I think, the O-line there, having Teron Armstead back is the real difference maker. Starting out the season, that's why it was rough. I mean, he just was not out there. I forget what it was, a labrum or shoulder injury. It was something that I think first 5-6 games, but now that he's been back, that moves everybody else to their natural positions. Andrus Peat, never really been a tackle. Sure, he played tackle at Stanford, but he needs to be inside where he can kind of win in a phone booth and just beat up whoever's face-to-face. And that Max Unger trade paid off in spades still. That guy's played very well for him, and what foresight they had to draft Ryan Ramczyk. Do we know Zach Streif's going to end up on injured reserve? No, but they just put Ramczyk right there at right tackle, and it's been good for them. And just really looking at this draft, I mean, it's paid off. The only downside is that Alex Anzalone, I think he busted up his shoulder, and he's done for the year, but he played well before that. Alvin Kamara, as I mentioned. Marcus Williams from Utah is a future stud. That's a quarterback of the defense going forward. And then Ramczyk, and you know too well, Adam, and Marshawn Lattimore playing in your backyard, that kid is developing into a shutdown corner. I'm not saying he's there yet, but the talent is clearly there. And, they basically hit 4 home runs with their first 4 picks. So shout out to their GM. He deserves a ton of credit for putting together a good team. But, yeah, it's a great recipe. There's a Hall of Famer behind center. The defense is able to pin their ears back. Secondary playing well. And, this is another team. I'm probably not telling the listeners anything new, but, you don't step in front of this train right now because the stove's piping hot.
Well, not only that, they hit on the draft too, but they really hit on A.J. Klein, who's played extremely well, a backup linebacker in Carolina, finally gets a chance to step up and play and, has a little bit of familiarity with the NFC South, and he's been extremely good in the middle of this defense. Von Bell has played well when he's been out there and able to be healthy. So, for New Orleans here, it's kind of a perfect storm, and also something if you're kind of looking forward here, and obviously you're running out of value on the Saints because they look so good. Drew Brees is on pace for his fewest pass attempts since 2009. And when you're a 38-year-old quarterback, as few times as you have to sling it, the better. So Brees may be a little bit fresher here as this team goes down the stretch, maybe if they're playing for home field advantage, or, of course, if they get into the postseason. So that's another thing where this running game kind of buys you some time here with Drew Brees as well, to the point where you don't have to have him go out there and throw it 40, 45, 50 times a game. He's out there throwing it a little over 30 times per game right now, and it's a formula that has really worked out for the Saints to this point. And it's kind of funny. We're going to talk about the Saints and the Vikings here, and the Vikings are the team that we're going to go to next. And I'm kind of looking at this thing in the NFC, Joe, and I'm not a huge believer in the Philadelphia Eagles. I've talked about that before here on the show. Maybe I should be because they're obviously off to such a good start. But, man, Vikings-Saints as an NFC championship game would not surprise me at all.
No, it wouldn't, because these are two well-coached teams. They've got experience and good defenses. That I would love to have like a Saints side against Philly in the playoffs, because that's a team that could keep pace. And they've been running the ball, yes and that, and Drew Brees probably happy as a lark, not having to attempt all these passes. Fantasy owners may be pissed off, but when they get tested, they still have the bailout option. Michael Thomas can win one-on-one and jump balls, I think, against just about anybody, and I'd like to test him against Xavier Rhodes. So, yeah, just thinking about that potential Vikes Saints, well, I hope it happens at some point if it's not the championship, but that'd just be a game to watch right there.
All right, so let's talk about the Vikings a little bit more here, who, of course, now looks like they're getting Teddy Bridgewater back, and we'll see how long it takes Bridgewater to work into the fold here. But also, I mean, Pat Shurmur is doing a fantastic job with Case Keenum. It was what Case Keenum's been able to do for this team. 21-29 over 3 Bills against the Redskins. 4 touchdowns, did throw a couple of picks. But, I remember back to when Dalvin Cook went out for the Vikings, and everyone kind of thought, okay, this is probably it for this team. They're losing this significant skill player that can do so many things in an offensive scheme like this. Yeah, this defense is good, but how is Minnesota going to keep putting up points? Sam Bradford's on one leg. I don't think too many people expected too much from Bridgewater here this season. And again, we'll see, how much Bridgewater can do going forward. But man, this Minnesota team, I know people aren't sold on this offense, but they look like a complete team to me. I think this offense is good enough. And obviously we know about Mike Zimmer's defense.
Yeah, I mean, this is just what the NFL should be about. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Just imagine what they'd be with a difference maker like Dalvin Cook. And I think if you're a listener, that's something definitely to file away for next year. That's just a home run hitter. He could take any play the distance, and that's kind of what this whole that would just really throw some dynamite in this whole mix. But yeah, they've addressed the O-line. I love the addition of Riley Reif. But you hit it. It's the coaching, not just Pat Shurmur running that offense. You got another former head coach, Tony Sperano, coaching up that offensive line. Longtime defensive coordinator Greg Edwards, and then really not just doing it for shout-outs, but Purdue head coach Darrell Hazel coaching those wide receivers, and look at the results. Stefan Diggs, I think already a really good player, but Adam Thielen under his tutelage, what has he done? He's become a very reliable receiver on the perimeter, and even Laquan Treadwell starting to show some signs of life. A little highlight reel catch a few weeks ago, but Darrell Hazel doing a good job. There's just a lot of guys on this staff, and it's a trickle down, from the top. I think all these guys just take that page and Mike Zimmer, no stone left unturned, all the attention to detail, and I think he really sets the tone. It's a great situation. Like I said, it's what football should be about. It's all from the coach, man. They really take after him, and I will have to address though one thing. Some people talk about, Bridgewater coming back, it creates a QB controversy. I couldn't disagree more. I think that just gives them another option. And if anybody thinks Bridgewater's getting in there anytime soon, before a healthy Case Keenum, I just think that's crazy talk. Bridgewater still needs time to get his legs back, sea legs, so to speak, and just basically this is a brand new offense. You think back to that injury he had. Now, Norvell Turner, if I remember right, was still running the show, and Sam Bradford's guy, Pat Shurmur, had to get in there because Sammy didn't like Norvell's Air Coryell number system. He needed to go West Coast terminology, which is what he learned, what he knows. So I think Bridgewater still, not just athletically, getting into calling these plays, spitting out the verbiage, that's a different thing for him from the very time that he had that, horrible injury that we all know about. So I think the Vikes have a good thing going with Keenum. You let him run this show. You put the game in the hands of your defense. And if I looked at Keenum, looked at Bradford, I think Keenum is not only more than capable, he may be the better option. And, I don't think college football fans would have to tell you. It's like, well, he does have the record for most passing yards in the history of college football last I checked. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's still got that record. The kid was razor sharp at Houston, and he's just a student of the game. He's picked up Shermer's offense, and, yeah, I think they'd be foolish to really go with Bridgewater at this point, because you also have to worry about the re-injury. I think you just kind of keep him on ice, and that I probably use this too much, Adam, but that is your break glass in case of emergency option, I think, at this point, just because Keenum's playing so well and the chemistry he has with these receivers, you can't take him off the field.
Well, and we'll get a good litmus test here for Minnesota over the next 2 games. They play the Rams this weekend at home, then the short week turnaround to play on Thanksgiving against Detroit, a little bit of extra prep time to go down to Atlanta and play against the Falcons, then on the road at Carolina. So 3 straight road games coming up after this Rams game for the Vikings. So I think we can find out a little bit more here about this team, and that is something I want our listeners to pay attention to as we go throughout the rest of the NFL season here, is that, some of these games are going to carry more importance from a handicapping standpoint. Everyone's going to talk about the standings and about playoff matchups and this and that. But, if Minnesota in a bad spot against Carolina playing a 3rd straight road game loses but plays well, that's still something that you want to file away. If they don't play well against Detroit on that short week on Thanksgiving, was it the spot? Was it something else? You always want to look below the surface to find out more about the NFL. And you're going to have some situations here to do that with Minnesota. And also, hey, you can do it with the Rams as well, with the Rams taking on a very good Minnesota team here coming up this week. Now, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars here, who, as I mentioned at the top of the show, had a chance to cover, but did find a way to win the game 20-17 here over the Chargers. It's generally not a good thing when Blake Bortles has to throw 51 times, so maybe that wasn't the most ideal situation for Jacksonville. And Leonard Fournette on the sideline late in that game, T.J. Yeldon getting reps over Fournette. That was a little bit of a surprise. So we could talk a little bit about the Jacksonville offense, but let's go ahead and talk about the Jaguars defense, because that's what you wanted to touch on.
Well, I just get jacked up watching these guys play. And, maybe the postseason they get caught, but the rest of this regular season, this defense will carry them. Ramsey, I'm going to have to fess up. That matchup against A.J. Green, not only was he in his head, he played well. I think Jalen's a star. Calais Campbell, that's paid off in spades. And Miles Jack, that's a clear upgrade over Paul Posluszny specifically. And just, we always talk about who has this team speed. Well, the Jaguars not just have the strength, they've got the speed as well. They're just doing a great job consistently stripping the ball. And from watching that game, just tipping passes, stripping ball, tipping passes. These are hallmarks of the great defenses you find. And Doug Marone's been good for this team. I'll do respect to Gus Bradley, but there's no doubt in the chemistry, the team culture, the attitude on field. It's just a little bit different. And, that was a rough game. Barely beat the Chargers, but I think that's a tough spot for him, too. The guy on the defensive side, Bradley, that we mentioned, he knows intimately that whole roster. So they should have got beat. I've been watching that. That was one of the craziest games I've seen. Plays that should have been turnovers, plays that should have been touchdowns, the Marquise Lee thing. You definitely have to worry about this team in the postseason. Because they're going to run into somebody, put the clamps on the running game, contain the edges, and then force them to pass. And they're doing a great job of hiding Bortles now, but you can't hide after that. So I worry about New England, obviously, a potential rematch with Tennessee, who beat them, or really Pittsburgh. I think if once they get their rematch, they'll have that angle going, but they'll have their offense sorted out. So it's just tough, because eventually the Bortles jugs machine is gonna kind of take this whole team down. But yeah, it deserves to be said. This Jaguar defense, it's just fun to watch. And another thing, not to overuse it, but this is what football should be about. It's just a whole unit of 11, no man more important than the other, and keep it all in front of you. That's just some of the secondary tackling. It gets you excited to watch football.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking at here, too, is that, with Boye and Ramsey and Church and Gibson, you've got the secondary that allows you to be aggressive and throw a lot of blitzes up there with your front seven. And that's been a working formula here for Jacksonville. And one of the things that you look at around the NFL is that the teams that don't beat themselves, the teams that can protect the quarterback, and the teams that don't throw a ridiculous number of interceptions or lose the ball with fumbles, they're the ones that are having the success. And I know that that sounds really obvious, but the NFL has basically become a don't F it up and you can win games kind of league. As long as you're not shooting yourself in the foot, as long as you're doing what you need to do to take care of the football, flip the field, get points every now and then, you can win a lot of games in this league. And I think that we see that, with the teams that are having success this year, both with the teams that have great defenses like the Jaguars, like the Vikings, like what the Steelers have become, like what the Panthers are doing. And then these offenses like the Saints, the Chiefs, the Rams, that just don't hurt themselves. I mean, it seems so simplistic, but that's basically what the game has become is, if you're not giving yourself 2nd and 12, 3rd and 13, you're going to find ways to win. And, I mean, maybe I am oversimplifying it, but it just feels like Jacksonville, with what they can do running the football and how deep they are at all levels of that defense, I mean, that's why they're a 6-3 team, why they should move to 7-3 after playing the Browns next week, why they could very well be 8-3 after playing the Cardinals, and then put themselves in position to not just make the playoffs, but also host a playoff game and then see what happens from there.
Oh, no, they are. They're going to host a playoff game, and you're right. They are keeping it simple, and simple stupid is working. Doug Marone's offense is winning in spite of Bortles, and if you watch them, it's all the cadences are the same. It's ready, set, go. They don't alter anything. They keep it simple. There's not a lot of shots downfield. It's quick timing throws. Get it out of the pocket because you don't have great pass protection, and that's Marone knowing his weaknesses, acknowledging it, and just running what he can get away with, and just relying on that defense, which to this point has been nails.
All right, I want to talk about DeShone Kizer a little bit here because I got a chance to watch the Browns game, and typically I kind of trade off on weekends. I'll stay home on Saturdays to watch college football, which means on Sundays, whatever errands need to be run with the wife, we go out and do those. But this time, ugly day, both of us kind of under the weather a little bit. I got to watch some football, so that was nice. But I watched the Browns game, and I've already talked about it here where they failed to cover the number, and I have no idea how they failed to cover the number in that game. But I was watching DeShone Kizer very closely because obviously, this quarterback carousel in Cleveland is something that basically never goes away. Now, with Kizer, I see an NFL arm. I see the ability to put throws into windows. I see the mobility to get away from the rush. I see the mobility to get those 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s. What I don't know if I see is the head to play the position. Am I accurate?
Well, yeah, there's some decisions that he made, but you hit the nail on the head again. It's just the pieces are all there. All the tools are in the toolbox. He's a big kid. He's athletic. He throws well on the run, and just first throw of the game, I think. He stepped right up in the pocket, down the left sideline, the outside shoulder. I think it was Sammy Coates, and another play that I think it's just 1st and 2nd and 10, whatever it was. He just outran 3 guys to the sidelines and just made them look like stiffs. That's where he really does win, I think, is you could get him running, and he makes such a difference there. But the scramble, I forget when it happened, he just, forced it out, took, I thought, 2 unnecessary shots. It's just bail, kid. Throw it away or just get down. There's nothing wrong with just finding the line of scrimmage, diving to the ground, and giving yourself up to live to fight another day. And I think that's how his game ended. He really took a gnarly shot, staring down the gun barrel, and maybe that's a shot, you just don't take. And then also there was a pick. That's one thing, though. There's flashes. There's glimmers of hope, and I think there's 2 times that I really like. He found Jared Davis matched up with, I think, a slot receiver. Hit the check down. It was a back shoulder. Didn't happen. But another time, he found Jared Davis again, and this is a guy I've dogged on in the show before because, he's just a Florida. He should be wearing a neck roll inside the box, just tackling people. He shouldn't be running with anyone. So at least that shows me he diagnosed found a mismatch, and the second time he found Njoku on him, drew a pass interference. So that shows me he's thinking just a little bit. Like I said, finding that mismatch, trusting his eyes and making the throw. He threw another dart to Hollywood Higgins over the middle. I thought that was just a laser. So, yeah, you love the tools, and it's unfortunate how this day ended because that was just a nickel blitz. The guy got all his body weight into him and took a gnarly shot to the ribs. So I don't know if we'll see Kizer again next week. If we do, that is one tough SOB. But, yeah, this guy at one point in time in the draft process was thought of as a first-rounder. Some people thought he might even be number one off the board kind of going into that last season at Notre Dame. But there are some placement issues, decision-making issues. I think really he does need to learn. He can slide. He's actually a very good slider. It's just he needs to do it a lot more often because he's taking some unnecessary shots. And right now it's just, he's a raw kid. He's still really young, and that's going to be one of the most interesting things this offseason is what Cleveland does, how highly they regard him going into the process because, they need answers at a lot of positions. But, man, there's a lot of tools to work with this kid. There's no doubt in that.
I don't know, man. I see where he is able to pick on some of those mismatches, and I see where, he kind of lets his natural talent sort of guide him. He threw a couple of balls on the sideline into tight windows that were very, very impressive throws. And then you get what you got at the end of the first half, where he audibles into a quarterback sneak, apparently. I mean, there was some consternation in terms of whether or not that was his call, whether Hugh Jackson had called a running play, because it looked like the wide receivers had gone in to block. So, I don't know what happened at the end of that, but you get some good, you get a lot of bad, you get some poor decision-making in terms of all the interceptions that he's thrown, but also this kid has very little to work with on the outside. The Browns at wide receiver are a joke. Kenny Britt gives an effort 15% of the time. Rashard Higgins is a guy that was on the practice squad coming into the year. Ricardo Lewis couldn't catch syphilis in an unregulated whorehouse. There are just so many guys on this team where there's just not enough help for this kid. Duke Johnson's a great player. Isaiah Crowell shows flashes as kind of a ground and pound type of back. But on the outsides, they have nothing. And whoever they bring in next year, if they do draft a quarterback high, he'll probably have nothing too. I mean, unless Josh Gordon comes back and looks like Josh Gordon of old. So I don't know what you do if you're the Browns, because there's going to be a lot of external pressure to take a quarterback, probably a lot of internal pressure to take a quarterback. Hugh Jackson's not going to have this job anymore, so who knows what will happen with that. Are the things that are wrong with DeShone Kizer, are those things that can be taught? Can you teach him to read a defense? Can you teach him to pick up on hot reads? Can you teach him to, have more of a feel for when pressure's coming? Or is it just one of those natural things that a quarterback has or doesn't have?
Too, it's where he comes from. This came from basically Kelly's zone read. So, yeah, this is still a very raw kid that needs to be taught a lot of different, not just concepts, but, yeah, the unfortunate part is it's just such a trial-by-error position at quarterback. You basically sink or swim, thrown to the wolves, and, yeah, it really – I forget who said – I think it was Chris Chandler back in the day said he really never learned how to play the position until he turned past 30. Which is unfortunate because his body totally fell apart by then. But it is just it so comes with time, and the real question is, will Kizer be given the time, because they will be pressured into taking a quarterback. It still is. I don't care what people say about this quarterback class now is looking terrible. Give me Sam Darnold any day. Sign me up for Josh Rosen. That kid's got all the capability to be a good passer. And I just look at last year's draft class, and then fast forward to this year's draft class, I'll take it. So, yeah, the pressure is clearly going to be there, but there's still an issue. What will the weapons be? Even if Corey Coleman comes back from, a broken hand or his injury, Josh Gordon even. But I don't understand where they're supposed to go in the draft outside of, hey, you're still number one. Taking Saquon Barkley might be the answer there, but you really have two capable running backs. So it's tough to have such a high pick in what is, I think, kind of offensive strong position. It's going to be quite the conundrum for the new head coach and potentially new GM.
All right, one more talking point that you wanted to touch on here, some non-quarterbacks that you feel like should move the Las Vegas lines. And a lot of times the skill position guys will maybe move it a half point, a point if you get a guy that's really significant, maybe a point and a half for somebody like an Odell Beckham or something like that, maybe a little bit higher given the situation for the Giants this year. But ultimately the skill position guys move the line a point to a point and a half at most. Linemen rarely move the line at all. And, of course, as we know, quarterbacks generally tend to move the numbers a fair amount. So who are some of the guys on that list for you, Joe, that you think should induce some sort of adjustment in the marketplace?
Well, watching that Cowboys game, Tyron Smith, I mean, that's clear cut. The 6 sacks for Claiborne, and a guy that he should send Jason Garrett a Christmas card every year and a personal note of thanks to feeding his family. I just that was bad coaching, but Tyron Smith still, that is a guy I think, you always talk about quarterbacks being team deodorant. Tyron Smith makes that whole line a lot better, and when he's not playing, that's noticeable. And then in the second half of that game, another guy, Sean Lee, that's the same thing. We talk about Luke Kuechly. Those two guys, I think, are they should be worth at least a point because they're running their defense in Carolina. We'll see it tonight. And mind you, if Luke Kuechly goes out at any point in this game, I will get an itchy trigger finger on a live bet because they're just not the same defense. We saw it midseason when Kuechly went out for that concussion. It's night and day. And that's the most identifiable situation, I think, in the league of a player-coach because they're running Luke's defense. He's checking the coverage. He's lining that team up, and he's got that green dot on his helmet for a reason. And I think, Sean Lee, he's the same way that he gets everyone. If there's anything out of whack in that front seven, he's going to be on point. And I think that defense is just a clear step slower when he's out of the lineup. And you could probably throw C.J. Mosley in Baltimore along that line, but it's just the difference in coaching, I think, in Baltimore. They'd be able to account for that. And the Giants right now, Odell Beckham, that was team deodorant. If anyone doesn't see it, they're crazy. That's a player that takes away, I think, another kind of like Greg Olsen. There's a chunk of that playbook that now doesn't exist because people can't do what he does. He's just that real threat on the deep route. Anytime he wants to run a 9, it's free clearance. He's that fast, and it's just that when he gets a double route, that's impossible for some corners. And I tell you, it used to be Von Miller, but I don't know what the defensive coordinator for Denver is doing, putting him out in coverage. Last night was probably one of the most frustrating things to watch. Von Miller only get 10, 12, pressures or opportunities to rush the passer. But be that as it may, I think if a player like Von Miller's out, you definitely make that adjustment and I think attack a line. J.J. Watt, that's clear right now. And then Fletcher Cox, as good as these Eagles are going, that's a man, another one. You can't block him one-on-one. You've got to account for it every single play. Those feet, the technique he has. He's not the biggest guy, but he plays like Paul Bunyan at whatever size he measures in. And just another guy, I think, if Jalen Ramsey now doesn't play, that's just adding that to the list. I mean, consider the numbers of the opposing number 1 wide receivers and how effective he's been. I know it's not a great thing, but getting in the head of A.J. Green, a guy who rarely even speaks on the field, shows a lot that he's not just a pest. He's not just annoying. It's not just a gimmick. There's real play going on there. So I think, those are definitely players you have to account for. And if Sean Lee misses another Cowboys game, I'm just getting on the fade machine against Dallas hard.
Yeah, me too. In the 2 games that Sean Lee missed, they gave up about 6 yards per play. So, if he can't go next week, I'm definitely looking to fade Dallas. Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. What's going on over there at the Bible right now?
Well, I will be dusting off my mock draft skills for the first mock of the year, closing out the month. And also in December, we are ramping up to 2 scouting reports a day. We're basically covering that whole senior class hard before the draft season hits. So if you want to get all on it, NFLDraftBible.com is where you need to go.
You can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe W. Everett. Joe, thank you so much for your time, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week, bud.
All right, looking forward to it.